Alright, so I'm currently reviewing Transformers Prime. I've given my 2 cents on its first sequel, Transformers Robots in Disguise, so it seems only appropriate to give my 2 cents on the fledgling series Transformers Cyberverse, the sequel to RID. This latest installment in the aligned continuity baffles me in a lot of ways. The animation is sort of strange, being this kind of borderless CG animation, cell shading hybrid. It's honestly hard to describe. I'm just going to show a clip of it here so you guys can kind of understand where I'm coming from, because this image that I keep up here is not going to do it justice. This one has outlines on the characters. The show itself doesn't. As I do, though, I do want to add a disclaimer to this video that there is some debate right now as to whether or not this show is a sequel to Robots in Disguise, and therefore a sequel to Prime. It's possible that they're just taking Prime and RID as a loose basis from which to draw the lore of this series. And if this ends up being true, a lot of the stuff I'm going to say in this review will be pretty invalid. But there are details in the first couple episodes of this show which suggest that it does exist in the same continuity. So that is what I'm going with at this point. Back to the art style, though. As I mentioned, and as you can see, the character models don't have outline, which wouldn't be a problem if it looked more like traditional CG and therefore the edges of the character models stood out, but it doesn't, and so they kind of end up blending into the backgrounds, and details on the characters kind of end up blending into each other. I did notice when watching the couple of episodes that I have watched so far, though, that I kind of managed to put this out of mind after just a few minutes, that it stopped bothering me, that I stopped dwelling on it. And while my experience in this regard isn't going to be universal for everyone, I do think that the majority of people will be able to do the same. What I don't think that people will be able to get over quite so easily is what they do to Bumblebee in this show. Just like RID took place a few years after Prime, this takes place a few years after RID, at least presumably so. Bumblebee has lost his voice again, which is something that was fixed by the end of Prime. And he doesn't even use like the Cybertronian cheeps and chirps that he used back in Prime. He uses his radio to communicate like he does in the Transformers movies, which is annoying. I'm not going to lie and say that it's not, but it's another one of those things that I did get used to as I was watching the show. And it's not as if this is true all the time. There are sequences where Bumblebee goes into his own mind with the help of Windblade, the fan-created character who I mentioned joined the cast of RID later on in the series, to try to recover his damaged memories. Because the entire plot of the series, at least so far, is that something has happened to Optimus and a few other Autobots who were part of a crew along with Bumblebee. Bumblebee is the only Transformer from that crew who has been found so far, being found by Windblade on Earth, and Bumblebee has lost his memories, so he can't tell her what happened to the others. It looks like it's going to be a recurring thing in this show to go into Bumblebee's memories and try to recover more memories of events leading up to a revelation as to what happened. Something that they will do over the course of time with multiple cortical psychic patches, something that I talked about very recently in a Prime review. A process which is far less dangerous in this specific situation because Windblade herself is a city speaker, which, if you don't know what that is, it's really complicated. I don't want to explain it here. Google it. In short, it gives her psychic abilities that let her merge minds with Bumblebee through the cortical psychic patch without any risk to herself. This is great. This is great continuity with Prime. It takes this thing that was introduced in Prime and makes it a major plot point here, even getting around its one major weakness. And already, this has started to build some really neat intrigue. It's building up a really neat mystery. The only part of it that really falls flat is the search for Optimus, since the opening of the show and the toy line makes it clear that Optimus is going to rejoin the cast fairly early. But still, we are left wanting to know what happened to these people. They were on a noble quest to find the Allspark. And in the meantime, there have been major developments, with the Decepticons coming back to power, led by Megatron again, of all people. Which I will talk about in a minute, but I want to finish talking about Bumblebee first. All of this is good. All of this is really good and solid. What's not is how they handle Bumblebee's character, at least early on in the show. I'm imagining it's going to change over time. Bumblebee went through his heroic journey. He became a worthwhile leader, this great character on par within Transformers lore with Optimus Prime himself. And then this series comes along and they revert him to something akin to a spoiled, bratty child. Yes, there are moments where he proves that he's still the heroic Bumblebee that we know and love deep down, where he comes to the aid of Windblade or fights off a Decepticon, but really his behavior is more reminiscent of Jar Jar Binks than of Bumblebee. And while I have no doubt that they've made him this insufferable so that they can, over time, turn him back into the character that he was, and it'll feel pretty satisfying, he is annoying enough at this point, and this is disrespectful enough to his character at this point, that I can understand why it would turn people off of this series. It's this close to turning me off of this series, and I actually kind of like the series so far. Then there's the question of why is Megatron suddenly leader of the Decepticons again? I talked about in my review of RID that I would have liked to have seen Knockout replace one of the characters on Bumblebee's team in that show, since he, at the end of Prime, turned into an Autobot, but we never really got to see what came of that. We never really got to see what came of Megatron stepping down as leader of the Decepticons either. We never really got to see what became of his character after he made that choice. Like, I'm a big proponent for stories making big changes to the character of Megatron. More modern versions of the character have more noble goals, at least originally, than past versions of the character ever did, which opens up possibilities for more modern versions of Megatron to become sort of anti-hero-esque characters rather than straight-up villains, and I really like the idea of that. For example, the current comic book iteration of Megatron is my favorite Autobot. Yes, you heard that right. Current comic book Megatron is an Autobot, and it looks like that's even gonna stick, at least until someone else takes over the comic and the story kind of resets itself. What I would have liked to have seen here was a new Decepticon faction rising up on Cybertron, starting to take power back, and maybe Megatron starts to consult the Autobots to deal with it. Like, something similar to that kind of happened in RID, but Megatron wasn't really directly involved, so I don't count it. Point is, if they wanted to bring Megatron into this show, fine, but I would have rather they brought him into the show as something more neutral than just leader of the Decepticons again. Now, maybe there's a reason for this. Maybe his ideologies have changed and he is developing the Decepticons into something different than what they were back in Prime. If that ends up being the case, then cool. But I really doubt it's going to be. That just seems a little too complicated for a show which, like RID, is intended to be for the target demographic, the target age group, and literally no one else. Still, the show could pleasantly surprise me. The first couple of episodes did already pleasantly surprise me, with just how interesting they managed to make the mystery of the series seem very quickly. As much of a mixed bag as this has been, though, so far, I do have one major problem with this show that might end up hurting my enjoyment for it overall. I get why they brought Windblade into this show. They wanted to use her psychic abilities as an excuse for why the quote-unquote psychic patch wasn't dangerous for her, and she's also a new character, a character who was created by fans, and who is right now very popular and sells a lot of toys. I get all of that, but from a narrative standpoint, this should be RC. RC and Bumblebee have known each other for millennia. If any strong female character is going to be the one to help him recover who he was, it should be her. And so far, Windblade's role in this story seems like it was written for RC in the first place. Just listen to this.
Listen carefully. We've known each other a very long time.
No, you haven't, Windblade. You've known each other for at most like 10 years or something. Transformers are nigh immortal beings. That's not a long time for you. Everything from her dialogue to her interactions with Bumblebee on a physical level, they come off as if they were written for RC with Windblade just superimposed on top of the character. And yes, I'm a huge Prime RC fanboy. I freely admit that. And I really want to see her again since she was completely absent from RID. And maybe they will bring her into this show at some point later. But I really don't see what the point of doing that would be since Windblade is already written like her anyway. This just makes me so mad. RID may have been littered with small missed opportunities, but this is a massive missed opportunity that I think is going to ruin this show for me overall. Like, maybe if I imagine hard enough, I can imagine that it's RC instead of Windblade. Maybe that'll get me through the show, but honestly, I'm very passionate about this. And the direction that the show is going, I get the sense that it's only gonna come off more and more as time goes by that RC should have been the character in this role. Like, come on, RC was the breakout character of Prime. Show her some respect, people. I don't know, I'm probably severely overreacting, and this show could round out to be at least as enjoyable as RID was. And like I said, I did enjoy the first couple episodes well enough. And I am going to be keeping an eye on it, don't get me wrong. I'm going to keep watching it, at least until I've formed a more concrete opinion. But as of right now, I feel like this series was probably a misstep, that they're probably going to regret the direction that they took this one fairly early on. Maybe that'll lead to a shift in the series that'll transform it into something better. See what I did there? Made a Transformers pun. But if that happens, then it wouldn't really be the same show anymore, so my criticism would still be valid, wouldn't it? My hat is just sliding right up because I got so much freaking hair. I'm actually gonna end this video here before I bitch and moan anymore. That has been my 2 cents on this topic, but I'd love to hear yours. Guys, what do you think of Transformers Cyberverse if you have seen what little of it has aired so far? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. or over on my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.